I'm Olivia, 28 female. I live in a modest one-bedroom apartment that I work very hard to afford, meticulously budgeting every dollar from my job as a data analyst. My life is a carefully constructed spreadsheet of income, expenses, and savings goals, a quiet world of order and predictability that I've built for myself. But a single act of misplaced trust was about to send a wrecking ball through it all, forcing me to use my skills for something far more personal than quarterly reports. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It started, as these things often do, with a perfectly reasonable request wrapped in a layer of manufactured urgency. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was just finishing up a late project, my eyes tired from staring at lines of code and data visualizations. My phone buzzed on the desk, displaying a picture of my younger sister, Madison. I answered, expecting her usual whirlwind of chatter about a new coffee blend she'd tried at work or some minor drama with her friends. "Liv, you are an actual lifesaver," she began, her voice a little breathless. "I am in a massive jam." I leaned back in my chair, swiveling to look out at the city lights. "What's up, Maddie?" "Okay, so my debit card just stopped working. I think I need to call the bank tomorrow, but I'm at the grocery store right now with a full cart, and it's super embarrassing. The line is getting huge. Could I please just borrow your card number for this one thing? I swear I'll pay you back on Friday when I get paid." This was classic Madison. She lived in a constant state of low-grade chaos, lurching from one minor crisis to the next. At 22, she was 6 years my junior, and she seemed to carry none of the financial anxiety that had been my constant companion since I'd moved out of our mother's house. She worked part-time as a barista, a job that barely covered her rent on the tiny studio she shared with her boyfriend, Kyle. The rest of her time was spent cultivating a fledgling social media presence, which she was convinced would one day make her rich and famous. I hesitated. I had a strict rule about not lending money, a rule born from years of watching our mother, Sharon, bail Madison out of one self-inflicted problem after another. Mom, a retired teacher with a heart of gold and a spine of jelly, saw Madison as a delicate flower who just needed a little extra watering. I saw her as a 22-year-old who needed to learn about consequences. "Maddie, I don't know," I started. "Please, Liv, I'm literally just getting essentials. Milk, bread, some chicken for dinner. It won't be more than $60 or $70. I'm standing right here at the checkout. It's so awkward." Her voice was laced with that specific brand of theatrical panic she was so good at. Against my better judgment, a wave of sibling protectiveness washed over me. I imagined her there, flustered and embarrassed, with a line of impatient people behind her. It was just groceries. What was the harm? I prided myself on being logical, on making decisions based on data. The data here was simple. My sister was in a bind, the amount was small, and the risk seemed minimal. "Okay," I sighed, pulling my wallet from my purse. "Get a pen. I'll read you the numbers. Just this once, Maddie, and you have to send me the receipt right after." "Oh my God, thank you. You are the best sister in the entire world. I promise. Receipt is coming your way in 5 minutes." I read her the card number, the expiration date, and the 3-digit code on the back. It felt strange, like I was handing over the keys to my financial kingdom. My credit card wasn't just a piece of plastic, it was a symbol of my hard work and stability. It had a high limit, something I'd earned through years of perfect payment history and responsible use. I used it for everything to maximize rewards points, then paid it off in full every single month without fail. It was an integral part of my meticulously organized life. She thanked me again profusely and hung up. I sat there for a moment, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. I shook my head, telling myself I was being overly cautious. It was just for groceries. She was my sister. 10 minutes passed, no receipt. 20 minutes, still nothing. I sent a quick text. "Hey, can you send that receipt?" A minute later, a reply came through. Sorry, was loading the car. It was $82.50. I'll send it when I get home, TA checks again. The amount was a little higher than she'd estimated, but still within the realm of a weekly grocery run for two people. I relaxed, turning my attention back to my work. I trusted her. Or, more accurately, I wanted to trust her. There is a difference. Wanting to trust someone is a hope, actually trusting them is a belief based on evidence. The evidence with Madison was shaky at best, but my hope was strong. That evening, I followed my usual routine. I finished my work, made a simple dinner, and read a book before bed. My banking app was set to notify me only of purchases over $200, a threshold I'd set to avoid being spammed with notifications for every coffee or sandwich I bought. I didn't get any alerts, so I assumed everything was fine. The lack of data, in this case, seemed to indicate a positive outcome. I fell asleep feeling like I'd done the right thing, helping my sister out of a jam without compromising my principles too much. I had no idea that while I was sleeping, the digital gates I had foolishly opened were being flung wide, and my financial security was being pillaged, one expensive, reckless purchase at a time. The silence from my phone was not a sign of safety. It was the calm before a storm I never saw coming. It was the quiet hum of a system working exactly as it was designed. A system that trusted the person holding the numbers, no questions asked. And I had given those numbers to the last person on earth who deserved that trust. The next morning began like any other. My alarm went off at 6:00 a.m., and I groggily reached for my phone to turn it off, my mind already cycling through the tasks for the day. Finish the quarterly analysis, prepare for the team meeting at 10, and squeeze in a workout after work. But as my screen lit up, I saw a wall of notifications that made my heart stop. It wasn't the usual collection of overnight emails and social media updates. It was a dense, overlapping stack of alerts from my credit card company and my banking app. My thumb trembled as I unlocked the phone. There were emails with subject lines like, "Your large purchase has been approved," and "Security alert, unusual activity on your account." My blood ran cold. I tapped on the first email. "Thank you for your purchase of $1,499.99 at Luxwear Fashions." I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to process the information. Luxwear Fashions? I had never heard of it. I certainly hadn't spent $1,500 there while I was asleep. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I frantically swiped to the next email. "Your payment of $850 to Flight High Travel has been processed." Another one. "Confirmation of your order for $2,200 from Texbree Electronics." It was a nightmare. Email after email, each one a blow to the chest. They were all time-stamped between 10:00 p.m. and 3:00 a.m. I jumped out of bed and rushed to my laptop, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type in my password. I logged into my credit card account, my breath catching in my throat as the homepage loaded. The balance, which should have been around a few $100s from my normal weekly spending, had ballooned. The available credit, usually a robust five-figure number, had plummeted. I clicked on Recent Transactions, and the full scope of the disaster unfolded before me. It wasn't just the big-ticket items from the emails. There was a flood of smaller, rapid-fire purchases, dozens of them. A $300 charge from a high-end makeup store, a $500 charge for a designer handbag, multiple charges from food delivery services for lavish-sounding restaurants. And then there were the ones that made no sense at all, a series of identical payments for $49.99 each to something called Cryptogo Wallet Top-Up. There were 10 of them in a row. The grocery purchase was there, a single, innocent-looking line item for $82.50 from yesterday evening. It was the Trojan horse, the simple, believable request that had allowed an army of fraudulent charges to march into my account. I scrolled through the list, my mind racing. The total was sickening. I quickly added it up in my head, my analyst brain kicking into a high-stress gear. The numbers spun and settled on a figure that felt like a fantasy. $8,742.31. In a single night, nearly $9,000 of my hard-earned credit had been vaporized. For a moment, I thought I'd been hacked. A random fraudster must have gotten my details. But how? The timing was too perfect. It happened right after I gave my number to Madison. The sick, sinking feeling in my gut told me this wasn't random at all. My first call was to the credit card company's fraud department. I explained the situation to a calm, professional-sounding woman who assured me they would open an investigation. "Can you confirm, ma'am, that you were in possession of your card at all times?" she asked. "Yes, it's right here in my wallet," I said, my voice cracking. "And you did not share your card details with anyone?" The question hung in the air. This was the critical point. If I said yes, I had shared them, it would no longer be a simple case of fraud. It would become a friendly fraud case, a dispute with someone I knew, and the bank's liability would be significantly reduced, if not eliminated. They make not cover the charges. But lying felt wrong, and they could probably find out anyway. I let my sister use it for a single grocery purchase yesterday evening, I admitted, shame and anger welling up inside me. She was supposed to spend under $100. The woman's tone shifted subtly. It was still professional, but a bit cooler. "I see. We will still open an investigation, Ms. Evans, but since the card details were willingly shared, it does complicate matters. We will freeze the card immediately." After hanging up, I felt a surge of adrenaline-fueled rage. I immediately called Madison. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text in all caps. "Madison, call me right now. ITSAN emergency." Minutes ticked by with no response. I pictured her sleeping soundly in her bed, oblivious or, worse, not caring about the financial carnage she had caused. I paced my apartment like a caged animal, my mind replaying our conversation from the night before. Her fake panic, my stupid hesitation, my eventual capitulation. I had been played, expertly and ruthlessly, by my own sister. Every detail of the scam was becoming painfully clear. She knew about my high credit limit. She'd once called me her rich sister, a joke that now felt like a bitter insult. She knew I paid my bill in full, meaning the credit was always available. She knew my notification threshold was set at $200, so she could make a flurry of smaller purchases without immediately tripping an alarm. She hadn't just used my card, she had exploited my trust and my habits with a chilling degree of calculation. The broken debit card was a lie. The grocery store story was a lie. It was all a premeditated plot to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford, using my financial stability as her personal piggy bank. The betrayal was so profound it left me breathless. This wasn't a mistake. This was theft. And it was committed by the one person in the world I was supposed to be able to count on. After an hour of unanswered calls and frantic texts, I couldn't wait any longer. I threw on some clothes, grabbed my keys, and drove the 20 minutes across town to the apartment building where Madison lived with Kyle. My hands were clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles were white. The entire drive, my mind was a storm of fury and disbelief. How could she do this? What was she thinking? I didn't bother buzzing up. I knew the building's front door was often propped open, and thankfully, it was today. I took the stairs to the third floor two at a time, my heart pounding with a rhythm of anger. I banged on the door of apartment 3B. After a few moments, the door creaked open, and Madison stood there, blinking sleepily. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt and looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Liv, what are you doing here? It's not even 8 o'clock, she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Don't play dumb with me, Madison," I snapped, pushing past her into the small, cluttered apartment. "Check your phone. I've been calling you for an hour." She shuffled over to the messy counter where her phone was charging and glanced at the screen. Her eyes widened slightly, but her expression quickly shifted from surprise to a kind of weary annoyance. "Oh my God, I was going to tell you," she said, not looking at me. "Tell me what? That you stole nearly $9,000 from me." My voice was rising, echoing in the small space. From the bedroom, Kyle emerged, shirtless and yawning. "Babe, what's going on?" he asked, then saw me and his expression soured. "Oh, it's you." I ignored him, my focus entirely on my sister. $8,700, Maddie. On what? Clothes? Flights? What could you possibly need that costs that much? Madison finally turned to face me, and the look on her face was not one of remorse or panic. It was defiance. It wasn't like that. Kyle and we've had some really bad luck. His crypto investments went south, and we were going to get evicted. We needed the money. The excuse was so flimsy, so transparently false that it just made me angrier. Evicted? So you bought a $2,000 TV and $1,500 worth of clothes. That's what you needed to pay your rent. Those were investments, Kyle chimed in from the doorway, puffing out his chest. You have to spend money to make money. Maddie's influencer career is about to take off. She needs to look the part. It's called branding. I stared at him, dumbfounded by his audacity. Branding? You think stealing from me is a branding strategy? I was going to pay you back, Madison insisted, her voice getting shrill. Once my channel gets monetized, it'll be easy. That could take years if it ever happens at all. This isn't monopoly money, Maddie. This is my life. That's my emergency fund, my savings, my perfect credit score that I have spent a decade building, all at risk because you wanted to play dress-up. The argument escalated, our voices edging louder and sharper. But as I laid out the facts of her betrayal, a strange thing happened. She didn't break down or apologize. Instead, she called for reinforcements. She called Mom. I knew it was happening before she even did it. I saw the shift in her eyes the moment she realized she was losing the argument on logic and facts, so she pivoted to her ultimate weapon, emotional manipulation, with our mother as her willing accomplice. 20 minutes later, Mom arrived, looking flustered and worried. She hugged Madison first, stroking her hair as my sister began to cry, weaving a sob story about the pressures she was under and how she'd made a silly mistake. Mom turned to me, her face etched with disappointment, but it wasn't directed at Madison. It was directed at me. "Olivia, your sister is in a difficult place right now. This is not the time to be yelling at her. She needs our help and support." I was stunned. "Mom," she stole from me. "She committed credit card fraud. This isn't about a difficult place. This is about right and wrong." "It's just money, Olivia," Mom said, waving her hand dismissively, a phrase she used whenever she wanted to minimize a problem she didn't want to deal with. "You're so successful. You have a good job. You can handle it. Madison is struggling. She's sensitive." The classic narrative of our family was playing out in real time. I was the responsible one, the stable one, and therefore my problems were never as valid. Madison was the fragile artist, the dreamer, and her actions, no matter how destructive, were always repackaged as cries for help. "She needs help, don't be cruel," Mom said, her voice softening into that gentle, pleading tone that was impossible to argue with. It was the guilt trip, expertly executed. She was framing my legitimate anger as cruelty, my demand for accountability as a lack of compassion. Kyle, seeing his opportunity, nodded sagely. "Your mom's right. We're family. Family is supposed to help each other out, no questions asked." I looked from my weeping sister to my pleading mother to Madison's smug boyfriend. I was completely outnumbered. They had formed a united front, casting me as the cold, heartless villain in this drama. My anger was being delegitimized, my feelings dismissed. They weren't just stealing my money, they were trying to steal my reality, twisting the situation until I was the one in the wrong. I looked at Madison's face, tear-streaked but with a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She knew she had won. Mom would smooth things over, promise Madison would pay me back when she could, and I would be expected to just absorb the financial and emotional damage. In that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, cold click. The part of me that had always sought their approval, that had hoped one day they would see and respect the boundaries I tried to set, simply shut down. I stopped arguing. I stopped trying to make them understand. I just stood there, my face a blank mask. "Fine," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "You're right." A wave of relief washed over my mother's face. Madison's crying subsided. Kyle smirked. They thought they had broken me. They thought I had accepted my role as the family ATM and emotional punching bag. I said nothing else. I turned around, walked out of the apartment, and closed the door gently behind me. They heard the click of the lock and assumed it was the end of the conversation. They had no idea it was the beginning of something else entirely. The argument was over, but my work was just getting started. They had chosen their side. Now, I would choose mine. Walking away from that apartment felt like stepping out of a fog. The heated, emotionally manipulative atmosphere in that room was designed to confuse and disarm me, to make me doubt my own sense of justice. But the moment I was alone in the hallway, clarity returned with the force of an ice-cold wave. They weren't going to help me. The bank was hesitant. Madison felt no remorse, and Mom was her chief enabler. If I was going to get any semblance of justice, or my money back, I would have to do it myself. When I got home, I didn't waste time on anger. I channeled all that furious energy into what I do best: analyzing data. My profession had trained me to be meticulous, to find patterns in chaos, and to follow digital trails to their logical conclusions. My sister and her useless boyfriend thought they had committed the perfect little crime, but they were amateurs. They had left a trail of digital breadcrumbs a mile wide, and I was going to follow every last one. I sat down at my workstation, not as Olivia the wounded sister, but as Olivia the data analyst. My personal feelings were irrelevant now. This was a project. The objective: to fully document the fraud and understand the underlying mechanics of their scheme. First, I pulled up the credit card statement again. I exported the raw data of all the overnight transactions into a spreadsheet: date, time, merchant, amount, transaction category. I started by sorting them chronologically. The pattern was immediately obvious. The spending spree began just 15 minutes after I gave Madison the card number. I started digging into the merchants. Luxwear Fashions was an online boutique specializing in fast fashion knockoffs of designer brands. Texpree Electronics sold everything from phones to massive TVs. I found the exact items they'd bought using the transaction IDs: a 75-inch smart TV, a new gaming console, 2 top-of-the-line smartphones, and a high-end vlogging camera. The "we're getting evicted" story was not just a lie, it was a pathetic, insulting lie. The flights from Flight High Travel were for 2 round-trip tickets to Miami, leaving in 3 weeks. A little vacation to celebrate their heist, I presumed. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. But the most interesting part of the data was the cluster of 10 identical payments to CryptoGo wallet top-up. This was Kyle's domain. I did a quick search. CryptoGo was a popular, lightly regulated platform for buying and trading volatile cryptocurrencies. Unlike a bank transfer, crypto transactions are largely anonymous and irreversible. This was their attempt to launder a portion of the money, to move it into an ecosystem where I couldn't easily get it back. They had converted about $500 of my money into some untraceable digital token. It was a clumsy but revealing move. It told me that Kyle was not just a freeloader. He was an active participant in the scheme, and he had a specific financial agenda. The next step was to connect these purchases to them directly. I needed irrefutable proof that it was Madison and Kyle who made the purchases, not some anonymous hacker. This was crucial for any potential legal action and for my own plan. I remembered Madison's obsession with her influencer career. Her social media was a public diary of her aspirations. I opened up her Instagram page, a curated feed of coffee shop photos and selfies. I scrolled through her recent posts and stories, and then I checked her following list. It was a goldmine. She had recently followed Luxwear Fashions, Texpree Electronics, and the specific designer handbag brand I'd seen on my statement. She had even liked photos of the exact items that had been purchased. It was a digital wish list that she had fulfilled using my credit card. Then I looked at Kyle's social media. It was even more incriminating. His was a public feed filled with cringeworthy posts about being a crypto guru and financial disruptor. He posted screenshots of trading charts, never showing his actual account balance, of course, and offered unsolicited advice about getting rich quick. He had recently followed CryptoGo's official account. But the real smoking gun came from a place they never thought I'd look. Madison had once asked me for help setting up her online storefront for some cheap jewelry she was trying to sell. To do it, I'd had to link her email to the store's backend, and I still had access to it through my own keychain. I logged in, feeling a pang of guilt for invading her privacy, but it was quickly overshadowed by my need for the truth. There it was. In her inbox, a series of order confirmations, an e-receipt from Luxwear Fashions addressed to Madison Evans with the shipping address listed as her apartment, an order summary from Texbury Electronics, same name, same address, the flight itinerary to Miami with both of their full legal names on it. They hadn't even bothered to be clever. They used her real name, her real address. Their arrogance had made them sloppy. They were so confident that I would just roll over and accept the loss, thanks to Mom's emotional blackmail, that they didn't even try to cover their tracks. I methodically screenshotted every piece of evidence. The Instagram follows and likes, Kyle's crypto-related posts, the order confirmation emails, the flight itineraries. I saved them all to a secure folder on my hard drive, creating a digital dossier of their fraud. Each screenshot was a nail in the coffin of their lies. The final piece of the puzzle was understanding the crypto angle. Kyle wasn't a genius trader, he was a gambler. These small-time crypto platforms often encourage trading with leverage or margin trading, where you borrow money to make bigger bets. It's incredibly risky. You can multiply your gains, but you can also multiply your losses, and you can lose more than your initial investment. The platform can issue a margin call, forcing you to deposit more funds, or they will automatically sell off your assets at a loss to cover your debt. A plan began to form in my mind, cold and precise, like a line of code. They had used modern digital tools to steal from me. I would use modern digital tools to deliver the consequences. They thought they were playing a simple game of theft, but they had unknowingly invited a data analyst to the table, and I was about to change the rules. My plan wouldn't be loud or emotional. It would be quiet, technical, and perfectly logical. It would not be about revenge in the heat of the moment. It would be about creating a scenario where their own greed and stupidity would become their downfall. The trap was no longer just an idea. I now had the blueprint. With my evidence gathered and organized, the anger that had been fueling me began to cool, replaced by a chilling sense of purpose. An emotional confrontation would accomplish nothing. Yelling and crying were their weapons of choice, not mine. My weapons were logic, precision, and an intimate understanding of the systems they had tried to exploit. My revenge, if you could call it that, wouldn't be a dramatic showdown. It would be a logical consequence, an equation I would set in motion where their actions would lead to an inevitable and disastrous result for them. The key to my plan was Kyle's pathetic foray into cryptocurrency. He fancied himself a Wall Street wolf, but his actions showed he was just a reckless gambler. His decision to use my money to top up his CryptoGo wallet was his biggest mistake. Not because of the amount, $500 was a drop in the bucket compared to the rest, but because it gave me a window into his world and a unique lever to pull. My first step was to call the credit card company again. This time, I spoke to a senior fraud investigator. I calmly and methodically laid out my case. I have an update on my fraud claim, I started, my voice steady. While the initial transaction was authorized for a small, specific purpose, I have definitive proof that my card information was subsequently used without my permission for a series of fraudulent purchases. I have email confirmations sent to the perpetrator's email address, with their name and shipping address matching the transactions on my statement. I explained that I had a folder full of dated screenshots and was prepared to file a police report for larceny and identity theft. I used specific terms like unauthorized use of financial information, making it clear I wasn't just a jilted family member, but someone who understood the legal and financial implications. The investigator's tone changed. This was no longer a messy, friendly fraud case. I had provided clear, actionable evidence of criminal intent. "Thank you for this information, Ms. Evans. This changes the complexion of the investigation significantly," he said. He assured me that they would begin the process of chargebacks for the physical goods and the flights. Getting the money back from Luxwear and TechSpree would be relatively straightforward with the evidence I had. Canceling the flights would also be simple. The TV, the clothes, the vacation, all of it would be clawed back. But I had a special request. "There is one set of transactions I do not want you to dispute," I said. "The 10 charges of $49.99 to CryptoGo wallet top-up." The investigator was confused. "Ma'am, are you sure? We can likely reverse those as well." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Consider those specific charges as authorized. Do not touch them." He was puzzled but agreed to put a note on the file. This was the cornerstone of my plan. I needed that $500 to stay in Kyle's crypto account. Reversing it would take my primary weapon off the table. My next step was more complex. I needed to understand exactly how Kyle was trading. I created a dummy account on CryptoGo to study the platform's interface and rules. As I suspected, it heavily promoted high-leverage margin trading to inexperienced users. It was a digital casino dressed up as an investment platform. A user could leverage their position up to 100 times, meaning with $500 in their account, they could control a position worth $50,000. It was a recipe for disaster for anyone who didn't understand the risk. And I knew Kyle didn't. His social media was full of buzzwords, not substance. He was chasing a fantasy. The final, and most critical, piece of my plan involved a bit of social engineering, using my mother as an unwitting pawn. I needed to plant a seed of information, a single, powerful piece of bait that I knew Kyle would be unable to resist. I called my mom a few days later. I put on a voice of resigned sadness, playing the part of the dutiful daughter they expected me to be. "Hi, Mom," I said quietly. "I've had some time to think, and you were right. Fighting about this isn't going to solve anything. I'm not going to pursue this with Madison anymore." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Oh, Olivia, that's so mature of you. I knew you'd do the right thing. Your sister is so sorry, she's just afraid to say it." I mentally rolled my eyes. "I know, Mom, and look, I don't want them to struggle. I was doing some research for a work project on financial tech, and I came across this crypto coin, Zenith Coin. My firm. Analysts are projecting a massive, short-term spike in its value. Something about a big corporate partnership being announced this Friday morning. They think it's going to jump by 300% or more overnight." I was, of course, lying through my teeth. Zenith Coin was a real but obscure, stagnant digital token. There was no partnership, no projected spike. But I was framing the lie in a context my mother would understand and trust, my professional expertise. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, clearly not understanding a word but happy that I was being helpful. "I just thought maybe you could mention it to Madison and Kyle," I continued, feigning reluctance. "Maybe if he's smart about it, he could use that crypto account of his to make back some of the money he owes me. I'm not saying it's a sure thing, but the data looks incredibly strong. The announcement is expected just before the markets open on Friday. He would have to invest tomorrow, on Thursday, to be in position." It was the perfect bait. A hot tip from a source he envied but also considered an expert. It offered him a chance to be the hero, to win back the money and prove his financial genius. His greed and ego would never let him pass up an opportunity like this. I knew my mom, in her misguided attempt to be a peacemaker, would pass along the information immediately. She would see it as an olive branch from me, a way for everyone to save face. The trap was now set. I had walled off the other fraudulent purchases, leaving Kyle with only the crypto money. I had dangled a juicy, irresistible piece of fake information in front of him. And I knew, with the certainty of a mathematical proof, that he would take that $500, my $500, and leverage it to the absolute maximum on a worthless coin, expecting to wake up a rich man on Friday morning. But he wouldn't be waking up to profits. He'd be waking up to the cold, hard reality of a margin call. Thursday was a day of quiet anticipation. I went about my work, my focus on spreadsheets and reports a welcome distraction. I could almost feel the gears of my plan turning hundreds of miles away. Around midday, I got a text from my mom. "Kyle is so grateful for your tip. He said you're a genius and he's going to make everything right. This is so wonderful, honey. You're bringing the family back together." I typed back a simple, "That's great, Mom," while a cold smile touched my lips. The fish had taken the bait. Kyle, blinded by arrogance and the promise of easy money, had undoubtedly pushed all of his chips, my chips, onto Zenith coin. He probably leveraged it to the hilt, turning my $500 into a massive, imaginary position worth tens of thousands of dollars. He would be dreaming of the life he would have tomorrow. The cars, the clothes, the respect he so desperately craved. That night, I didn't sleep much. I wasn't nervous. I was observant. I was a scientist waiting for the result of a carefully prepared experiment. The digital world is governed by rules and automated processes that are ruthlessly efficient and feel no emotion. At a certain point, when a leveraged position's losses reach a critical threshold, the system automatically liquidates the assets to protect the lender. This process is impersonal and irreversible. It's called a margin call, and it's a trader's worst nightmare. Zenith coin, the subject of my fabricated tip, was a stable but low-volume cryptocurrency. It wasn't going to spike by 300%. In fact, it was more likely to do what most obscure coins do, slowly bleed value. For my plan to work perfectly, I needed to give it a little nudge in the right direction. Around 2:00 a.m., I logged into a separate, anonymous crypto exchange. Using a small amount of my own money, a few $100s I considered a business expense, I placed a series of strategic sell orders for Zenith coin. In a thinly traded market like this one, even a small amount of selling pressure can create a disproportionately large price drop. It's like throwing a pebble into a very still pond. The ripples are huge. I watched the chart on my screen. The price of Zenith coin, which had been flat for weeks, began to dip. Not a crash, just a steady, relentless decline. It dropped by 5%, then 10%, then 15%. For a normal investor, this would be a minor, recoverable loss. But for someone like Kyle, who was leveraged 50x or 100x, it was catastrophic. A 1% drop in the coin's value meant a 50% or 100% loss of his initial capital. With a 15% drop, his position wasn't just losing value. It was deep in the red, and he now owed the platform money he didn't have. The system's automated liquidation protocols would be kicking in. I closed my laptop and went to bed. The rest was out of my hands. The code was already executing. My alarm was set for 6:00 a.m. as usual, but I was woken a few minutes before by a sound from the world outside. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and despair. A man was aiming. I got out of bed and walked to my window, which faced the street. Even from several floors up, the sound was clear. It wasn't just yelling, it was a raw, guttural howl of financial ruin. The title of my story had predicted this moment, and reality was not disappointing. He opened his account and screamed so loud the whole block heard. I didn't need to see him to know it was Kyle. I pictured him in that cluttered apartment, having woken up early to check his glorious profits before the market opened. Instead of a balance of thousands of dollars, he would have seen a zero. Or, even worse, a negative balance. A notification from CryptoGo would have coolly informed him, "Your account has been liquidated due to a margin call. You have 24 hours to deposit funds to cover your negative balance of X." His entire leveraged position had been wiped out. My initial $500 was gone, of course, but that was a price I was more than willing to pay. More importantly, because he had been trading on margin, he now owed the exchange money. His desperate gamble to get rich hadn't just failed, it had put him into debt. At exactly 6:02 a.m., my phone rang. It was Madison. Her voice was a hysterical shriek. "Olivia, what did you do?" I kept my own voice perfectly calm. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Madison. Kyle's account, it's all gone, everything. He said you gave him a tip that Zenith coin was supposed to go up. It crashed, we're ruined, he owes the money." "That's a shame," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. "Investing is risky. I thought a financial guru like Kyle would know that. The data I saw must have been misinterpreted. These things happen." "Misinterpreted?" she shrieked. "He says you did this on purpose, that you tricked us." "Madison, that's a very serious accusation," I replied coolly. "Why would I do that? I thought I was helping, just like Mom wanted. Didn't she tell you I was bringing the family together?" There was a sputtering on the other end of the line. She was finally starting to understand. I hadn't forgiven them. I had simply switched battlefields, moving from her territory of emotional manipulation to my territory of cold, hard data. And she had walked right into it. "You'll pay for this," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. "No, Madison," I said, and for the first time I let the ice in my voice show. "You already paid, the TV is being returned, the flights are canceled, the clothes are being sent back, your little shopping spree is over. What happened with Kyle's account was simply the final transaction. Consider it a service fee. Now I have to get ready for work. Have a nice day." I hung up the phone before she could respond. I stood there in the quiet of my apartment, the faint sound of Kyle's distant screaming finally fading. There was no joy, no triumphant laughter, just a profound, quiet satisfaction. It was the feeling of a complex problem solved, an equation balanced. They had wanted to live a fantasy life funded by my hard work. I had simply introduced them to the one thing they never bothered to learn: every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The days following the 6:02 a.m. scream were strangely silent. I expected a storm of angry calls from Madison and a flurry of tearful, guilt-inducing texts from my mother. Instead, there was nothing. It was an unnerving quiet, the kind that follows a major explosion. I half expected them to show up at my door to escalate the confrontation in person, but they never did. The chargebacks on my credit card began to process. One by one, the fraudulent charges were reversed. Luxwear Fashions, Tech Spree, Flight High Travel, the credits appeared on my statement, wiping away the damage. Within 2 weeks, my balance was back to normal, my credit score untouched. The system had worked, thanks to the undeniable evidence I had provided. My financial world was restored to its previous state of order. It was my mother who broke the silence about a month later. She called me on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was hesitant, stripped of its usual cheerful authority. "Olivia, do you have a minute to talk?" "I'm listening," I said, my tone neutral. She sighed, a long, weary sound. "Madison and Kyle broke up," she said. "He lost everything. He had to move back in with his parents. He blamed Madison and she blamed him. It got very ugly." I didn't say anything, I just let her talk. "She's moving back home into her old room," Mom continued, her voice cracking. "She lost her job, the coffee shop let her go, and Olivia, she's so depressed, she just stays in her room all day. She won't talk to me." My mother was waiting for me to offer sympathy, to feel guilty, to step in and fix things like I was always expected to. But the person who would have done that was gone. I had spent my entire life trying to manage their chaos, to be the stable pillar in our dysfunctional family. All it got me was betrayal and nearly $9,000 in debt. "That sounds difficult for you, Mom," I said, my voice calm and even. It was an acknowledgement of her feelings, but it was not an acceptance of responsibility. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Is that all you have to say?" she asked, a hint of her old disappointment creeping in. What would you like me to say? I asked genuinely. Madison made a series of choices. She chose to steal from me. She chose to lie. She chose to stay with a boyfriend who encouraged her worst impulses. These are the consequences of her choices. They have nothing to do with me. You could show a little compassion. She's your sister. I showed compassion for 28 years, Mom, I replied, my voice still quiet but now edged with steel. My compassion was repaid with theft and deceit. I was told not to be cruel. It turns out, the cruelest thing we ever did for Madison was shielding her from reality. I'm not going to do that anymore. It was the first time I had ever spoken to her with such unshakable finality. She didn't know how to respond. The old tools, guilt, emotional appeals, appeals to family loyalty, were no longer working on me. We ended the conversation soon after. It was stilted and awkward, the end of an era. I didn't hear from Madison directly. I saw through the grapevine of social media that she had deleted her influencer account. Her digital dream, built on a foundation of fantasy and my money, had crumbled. The pictures of a glamorous life were gone, replaced by silence. Maybe, in that silence, she would finally be forced to confront the person she had become, or maybe not. It was no longer my problem to solve. My life returned to its quiet, orderly rhythm, but something fundamental within me had changed. I was no longer afraid of a family confrontation. I no longer felt the compulsive need to keep the peace at my own expense. I had learned that true peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from having strong, unbreachable boundaries. The $500 I lost in the crypto scheme was the best money I ever spent. I didn't think of it as a loss. I thought of it as a payment. It was the price I paid to buy back my own peace of mind. It was the severance package for a toxic family dynamic I had finally decided to quit. My relationship with my mother is strained now. We talk, but it's superficial. She's still waiting for me to become the daughter I used to be, and I am quietly, firmly refusing. My relationship with my sister is non-existent. I don't hate her. I don't wish her ill. I simply don't think about her at all. She is a data point from a closed project, an anomaly that has been identified and archived. Sometimes, when I'm working late, I look at the spreadsheets on my screen, the clean lines, the logical formulas, the predictable outcomes, and I feel a deep sense of calm. I have built a life for myself where things make sense. And I have learned in the most painful way possible that I am the only one responsible for protecting it. I will never again hand over the keys to my kingdom, no matter how convincing the story, no matter who is asking. My security, my stability, and my peace are not for sale, and they are certainly not available to borrow.